Hello everyone. I'm just going to do a short video today, but there's a longer one coming on the Changeling and Suzanne Delage. This one I just wanted to talk about A Good Man is Hard to Find, just a little bit, right? As well as the Glass Menagerie. Now, I made that optional for the reading, but I feel like if you were inclined to write about it, that could make a good final paper, really. So with the Glass Menagerie, right, we have a play that is very different than Shakespeare's Hamlet. If you look at the stage directions, they're extremely precise, right? It's like, oh, this wall will open up, and then the audience will see here, and then they can see into the balcony. So there's very precise instructions for exactly how this is set up. Now the characters, though, are nothing like Shakespearean characters, right? These are people in dead-end jobs with psychological problems to some degree. I mean, the daughter does have some condition, right? But for all intents and purposes, she's a hypochondriac shut-in. That's the implication of the play right there. And so the mother is trying, right? Trying to get things to proceed forward. But does that cripple her son or not? And so my favorite part of this, right, is actually where the gentleman caller, as the mother would have him, I think his name is Tom, when he shows up there, and he's had that moment on the balcony, right? And they're talking about the things that she collects and things like that, and how, something that can make possibly a unicorn unique when it breaks, it's just a horse, but then again, it can exist with normal individuals, right, and do things. It's not set apart and different and fantastic in that way. But he gives that advice about speaking that I've always found so interesting, where he's like, just talk really loud, right? Because there's something special about you. What do they have that you don't? Everybody's got something special about them. So he's got all these trite aphorisms, and really he's pretty worthless as a motivational speaker, and yet, right, and yet this succeeds a little bit in getting her out of that shell. And then we have the son who really just abandons everybody. And so this is kind of the big artistic dilemma of the playwright Tennessee Williams' life, as well as the artist in that milieu. How do you make something lasting and valuable when you're stuck, like working at a shoe store, right, where there's nothing you can do, or where you're trapped, really? And so this is that low mimesis that we talked about in class just a little bit. Now, I was really surprised in some of the answers to those Rose for Emily questions, because a lot of people said, oh, she killed Homer because he was spreading rumors. Well, even if you don't necessarily buy into the subtext that he might be homosexual and not really interested in her at all. He's not the marrying type, and he liked men, and he hangs out with all these young men, and he wears those yellow gloves. But even if you don't buy into that or think there's enough really there to justify that, the implication is that he's not serious about her and that he's going to leave. And that's the one thing she can't accept, is change, right? She can't accept that change, and so it's an attempt to keep things as they are, just as she's a relic of the past, really, which I think is pretty interesting. So I don't think it has anything to do with Homer starting rumors or anything like that. It's just the fact that she can keep him from leaving, but to do so, she has to kill him, and then she exerts that ultimate control. So A Good Man is Hard to Find. This is one of my favorite stories in the semester. I also love the ones that I assigned for today, Changeling and Suzanne Delage. But this one, Flannery O'Connor, Catholic writer. Now, there is something that I would like us to think about that you can always reference when you're writing your papers, and that is authorial intent, right? Does the author have the final say on what's going on with their characters, or is reception more important? And I have my own opinions about that, especially for plot, but for the intents and purposes of your papers, right, you can explore that avenue. So Flannery O'Connor said that in A Good Man is Hard to Find, the only character that had the capacity to be a saint was actually the misfit. And what the heck does that mean? This guy is a cold-blooded murderer, right, who has no real moral compass. Now, he does gravitate, though, to manners. So this story is really about moral absolutes, right? Because he's like, I apologize, ma'am, for not having a shirt on. He's apologizing because he's not dressed appropriately in front of a lady, and he's like, here, hold her hand out there into the woods. Well, you're going to execute her, right? So what does this gentility or this chivalry matter if you're just a cold-blooded killer? And yet there's something about the misfit and his gravitation to absolutes, because he's not certain that there's a spiritual existence or that there's a reward for good and evil, and so he has to latch on to something, right? So in the absence of proof, he latches on to manners and social, like, mores and customs, but to us, from I think this modern point of view with clinical diagnoses of antisocial or psychotic behavior. Real quick clarifier there: when I say antisocial, I mean the actual clinical diagnosis, which is very different than when somebody says I'm antisocial. No, you're probably not. You're avoidant, right? You're exhibiting avoidant behavior. You don't like the crowds or whatever. Antisocial behavior, from a psychological perspective, is you have no real idea of how to tell the severity of like right or wrong, right? So if I ask you, hey, what's worse, stealing that candy bar or killing 5 people? You're like, okay, hold on a second, let me think about it. I think it's killing 5 people because the punishment is more severe. Am I right? But there's no real sense, right, that the person can actually tell right from wrong there. So that's a little bit different than the way we normally use the term there. So the misfit might fit into that kind of category. Because right and wrong, there's like he gravitates to absolutes. And then the question is, that grandmother character, when she reaches out to him at the end, does that actually make a difference? Because his attitude was kind of like, well, ain't no fun if you can't kill somebody, right? Like, there's no pleasure in life except meanness. And then at the end, when she reaches out and says, oh, you're my own child, right? Then we have to ask, okay, is that just a selfish act to try and save herself? Or did she see something in him, right? Something that was positive, something that was good, something that was not necessarily as depraved as it seemed to be? Because ultimately he wanted to make the crimes fit the punishment he felt he had received already, being incarcerated, which is an interesting way of viewing justice, really, right? If there's any kind of justice involved in that. So when she reaches out there, is she just trying to save herself, or is there actually something selfless? And he says, she'd have been a good woman if there was somebody to kill her every day of her life. And is that the good man in the title? Is it just the good human being that's hard to find? Is it the threat of death, the threat of judgment that makes us good? Or is it something else, right? When we're in a situation and that goodness has to actually express itself and we no longer just see the small view. So is she selfish? Is she not? But the author, Flannery O'Connor, says that the misfit is the only character with the capacity to be a saint. Does that reaching out towards him make him something better? Because at the end, what does he say? There's no pleasure in life, right? Not even meanness will do it for him anymore. There's nothing that will make life fun and enjoyable and worth living. But is this a step to redemption or something else? Because he's like the dragon on the side of the road, right? You take this path off and suddenly there's that dark evil, almost like Poe. But, Flannery O'Connor is normally classified as Southern Gothic, but not necessarily as overt, right? There are normal, more or less, normal slice of life characters in a Flannery O'Connor story, even though you get that kind of psychological disturbance. She has so many great stories. I think one of the great short story writers of our era. So I also think that Gene Wolfe, the Changeling and Suzanne Delage, is one of the great short story writers of our era as well. But he likes to obscure plot details a lot. So I'm going to make possibly a longer video tomorrow after you've had a chance to turn in your assignments. Hopefully everybody's on track. Remember, the fourth and final paper can be an expansion of anything that you've written on. You just need to find 4 viable sources. It has to be in MLA format. So I'm just going to upload this very quickly. And then I guess this week I'll get to grading. I hope everyone's doing well, and I really miss class and seeing you guys.